Hi, welcome to my channel, True Crime with KT. If you like today's video, please be sure and give me a thumbs up and think about subscribing. And if you are a returning subscriber, I very much appreciate you. It's been a while since I've created a video and posted one here. I ended up having COVID, and then my mother passed away, sadly. And I ended up with a sinus infection after that, so I just haven't felt well, but I've not stopped creating my true crime videos. I'm still very interested in doing this, and so hopefully I'll get back into the swing of things now. Today I'm going to cover a case that I had sworn to myself and to others that I would not cover for various reasons, and that is the Chris Watts case. One of the reasons why I didn't want to cover it is because the victim's family, the Ruscheks, had requested that people stop talking about the case. But this is the case that got me involved with true crime in the first place. I had studied this case for a couple of years, and I've listened to many videos, and I've read books and articles, news reports, just on, and I have a theory and I have some opinions, and I kind of wanted to flesh it all out and discuss it, and that's the main reason why I'm covering this today, and maybe I'll just cover it one time and not revisit it. And I would just like to remind everyone that this is a very troubling case. If you're sensitive to these type topics, especially crimes involving women and children, you may not want to listen, you may not want to watch. I don't know how in-depth I'm going to get. I may not get into too many details, but I might. So that's just a warning ahead of time. I want to talk a little bit about my background and why I'm interested in true crime. It's in my About section, but I've never really talked about it in any of my videos. But I have a master's in counseling psychology from the University of Southern Mississippi, and I've worked with adolescent offenders and children and adolescents that had emotional or behavioral problems and were diagnosed with things such as oppositional defiant disorder or conduct disorder. I also worked with adults and children with autism, and all that is going to kind of be connected in this case when I talk about it, so I thought that was somewhat relevant here. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard about the Chris Watts case. It's everywhere. There's books, there have been movies on Netflix, or I would say documentaries, and it's been on the news. But just to give you a tad of background, on August the 13th, 2018, Chris Watts, as he has confessed, murdered his wife, Shannan Watts, who was pregnant with their child, Nico, and also his daughters, Bella, who was 4 years old, and Cece, who was 3. And that happened in Frederick, Colorado. And the photo that you're seeing here is Survey 19, where he had buried his wife in the field there in a shallow grave and placed his daughters into the oil batteries that you see in the photo. He put Bella in one and Cece in the other after smothering them. Chris confessed to having strangled his wife on August the 13th before loading her body into his truck along with his 2 girls. He originally had confessed to only killing Shannan and said that he had killed her in response to her killing their 2 daughters, but later confessed to having killed all 3. All of their bodies were recovered from the Survey 19 site 3 days after he murdered them. Before I get started talking about my thoughts, I'm just going to briefly cover a few of the resources that I've gathered information from and that are available out there. One of them is a book written by Cherlyn Cadle entitled Letters from Christopher. Now, I ordered myself 3 copies of this book because I couldn't wait. I wanted the book so badly, and I wanted to get the first ones, and I wanted to give one away and give another as a gift. And so I ended up with 3 copies of it before finding out that at least a portion of the book was plagiarized. And Miss Cadle has admitted this, and I think the books were pulled. Anyway, I read one, and some of my information is from that, and she corresponded with Chris through letters, and she also visited with him in prison. There's another book that I've not read that I've heard is a very good book, and I don't know what her theory is, but I've heard a little bit, and I'm not trying to copy anything that she said, and I've not read it. And since I've not read it, you can't say that any of this information came from her. My theories have not come from her, but I imagine that our theories may be similar because our backgrounds may be similar. But the author's name is Lena, Derhally, and the name of the book is My Daddy is a Hero. And from everything I've heard, that's probably one of the best resources. And I do hope to read that eventually, but I really kind of wanted to give the Chris Watts thing a break. And if any of my theories overlap with hers, I do apologize. I'm not trying to copy anything that she said. I have watched the documentary that's on Netflix that's very popular right now, and it's American Murder, The Family Next Door, which is on Netflix. And I thought it was pretty accurate. And also, I've watched the Chris Watts Confessions of a Killer. That was on a network. I don't remember which one, but I saw that one as well. Chris Watts, to me, is an enigma. He has me stumped. And he has since the very beginning. And I've kind of been referring to him all along as a unicorn. A lot of people have been just throwing out the word, he's a narcissist, he is a psychopath. But I have trouble with that. And I'm going to explain a little bit as to why. To me, he doesn't fit any particular category. He just sort of hit and miss a little bit here and there. And I think he honestly had the investigators that were interviewing him stumped as well. And I think that's why they've kind of revisited the case with him. And people have wondered, is he telling the truth? Has any of his confessions been the complete truth? I want to start with conduct disorder, which is a diagnosis in the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual used by the American Psychological Association. And it's called the DSM-5. But according to the DSM-5, conduct disorder is a disorder that's given to adolescents or children who are younger than 18. You can diagnose someone with conduct disorder if they show signs of aggressiveness, fighting, hurting animals, lying, stealing, rule violations such as skipping school, not following their parents' rules, lack of remorse or empathy, manipulating others, lack of emotional expression. And when you listen to interviews with Chris's mother, she says he was a well-behaved child. She didn't have problems with him. There was no history of him having problems in school. So there's not a lot to really diagnose him with conduct disorder prior to him being 18. There's no one has come forward and said, well, yeah, he had problems in school. He got in trouble a lot. You don't have people who've said, yeah, he used to fight. He had behavioral problems. There's just no family members or friends that have come forward to back up a conduct disorder diagnosis. Now, as an adult, I believe you could say that he had a lack of remorse or empathy and lack of emotional expression. But that doesn't fit the diagnosis for conduct disorder because that's as an adult. I don't know anything about his childhood where we could say if he had a lack of empathy or lack of emotion. I don't know. There's not enough information out there. And, you don't see any reports of these other things such as stealing, aggressive behavior, fighting. So there's nothing that I can think of that would be enough to diagnose him with conduct disorder prior to him becoming an adult. Now, once a person is over the age of 18 and they show signs of disregard for and violation of others' rights, since the age of 18 and past the age of 18, you could diagnose a person with antisocial personality disorder, which basically is a failure to obey laws and norms by engaging in behavior which results in criminal arrest or would warrant criminal arrest. The person would engage in lying, deception, manipulation for profit or self-amusement, impulsive behavior, irritability and aggression, manifested as frequently assaulting others or engaging in fighting, blatant disregard of safety of self and others, a pattern of irresponsibility, a pattern of lack of remorse. And they would also have conduct disorder, which would be present by history before the age of 15. So that's basically what you would call a sociopath or a psychopath. And as this says, they would have had to be diagnosed with conduct disorder by history. And we don't have that with Chris. No one has said he had conduct disorder as a child. And no one has said that he has engaged in impulsive behavior or fighting or illegal behavior. Now, that's up until this crime that he committed with the murders. Now, all of a sudden, he has engaged in those behaviors, but there have been no reports of those behaviors prior to that. He doesn't have a history of being arrested. He doesn't have a history at work getting into fights that we know of, or lying or stealing or anything like that. So I wouldn't really diagnose him with antisocial personality disorder. Now, people have said, well, he's a narcissist. Well, according to the DSM, there's the narcissistic personality disorder, which a person would be overly boastful, exaggerating one's own achievements, pretending to be superior to others, lack of empathy for others, looking down on others as inferior, monopolizing conversations, being impatient, angry, unhappy, depressed, or have mood swings when criticized, easily disappointed when expected importance is not given, always craves for the best in everything, has a very fragile self-esteem. Well, when they've interviewed his co-workers and his friends, no one has really said that Chris engaged in any narcissistic behaviors like that. So he doesn't fit that diagnosis either. But people have been throwing around, oh, he's a narcissist. Oh, he's a sociopath. Well, he doesn't really fit the criteria. And then you have criteria such as what this says, as a sense of self-importance, lack of empathy, arrogant behavior. Now, he did have lack of empathy, most definitely. When if you kill your children and your wife, your pregnant wife, that you definitely have lack of empathy. But arrogant behavior and a sense of entitlement, I didn't see him engaging in anything that would demonstrate those symptoms. So, yeah, he doesn't really fit that either. But one thing that has stood out is his co-workers said he was very quiet. Even his neighbors have said he's very quiet, withdrawn, kind of kept to himself. They called him Rain Man because he was able to memorize maps, and Shannan said he was book smart. He was able to memorize materials. And I read somewhere that he had an IQ of 140. That's high. That's very, very intelligent. And so I thought, well, Rain Man, that was a diagnosis of Asperger's back in the day. Now, we no longer diagnose people with that. We now call Asperger's on the autism spectrum or an autism spectrum disorder. But if you go and you look into the Asperger's criteria back in the day, they would be lack of social awareness, lack of interest in socializing or making friends, difficulty making friendships, inability to infer the thoughts, feelings, or emotions of others, avoiding eye contact, lack of changing facial expressions, inability to perceive nonverbal cues for communications, unusually sensitive to noises of touch, odors, taste, or visual stimuli, stereotypical and repetitive motor patterns such as hand flapping or arm waving, and sometimes an obsessive interest in special topics such as trains or weather or music, things that some people would not know that much information about a certain topic. But they're usually repetitive and intense when compared to other children's interest or other people's interest, or they have a specific or narrow interest. But, other than appearing awkward in videos or in photos or being somewhat introverted, he doesn't really have all of the symptoms that would be part of an Asperger's diagnosis, even though we don't diagnose people with Asperger's anymore. And of course, I'm trying to diagnose him with a certain disorder, but people with Asperger's are not known to go around killing their entire family. So I'm not trying to imply that people with autism or Asperger's are murderers. I'm just trying to explain what could have been going on with Chris, why his behaviors would seem somewhat abnormal or not. And regarding autism spectrum disorder, he doesn't really fit that diagnostic criteria either. I mean, he was socially awkward and everything, but it just doesn't seem to be, he doesn't meet all of the criteria for that diagnosis. Such as not wanting to be cuddled, not wanting to have eye contact with others, not being able to understand other people's feelings or talking about their own feelings. Now, maybe there might be something there. He might have had problems talking about his feelings. He did seem to lack empathy. And also not being interested in other people, not knowing how to talk to other people. I mean, being reserved and quiet and introverted does not mean that he didn't want to talk to other people or couldn't. Which leads me to sort of my theory or my ideas about this case, which probably correlate with at least one or two others that I've heard out there. I've heard someone say something about a perfect storm theory. I don't know where that came from originally. I don't know if it's from my Daddy is a Hero book. It could very well be. Like I said, I've not read that. So I'm not stealing the perfect storm phrase, but I have some ideas that correlate with that. He doesn't seem to fit in any one particular diagnosis like I've already mentioned. So I'm going to talk about some of the factors that were going on in his life, such as he had mentioned not sleeping, he had insomnia. Of course, that affects your judgment. The Thrive patches, I think he was wearing 2. And I was curious, what's in that? What's in the Thrive patches? And from what I understand, it's a patented weight management compound called Forceline. It's from the Coleus forscoli plant. in India. And it helps with weight management. And also the patch contains green coffee bean extract, Garcinia cambogia, which helps with weight loss and appetite control, I believe, cocutin, white willow bark, cosmoperine, which is extracted from the black pepper, and it works to help with the bioavailability of the ingredients in the Thrive patch. So, it has that forceline stuff in it, and it's not approved by the FDA, and maybe it did have some effect along with other contributing factors. He also had a new body. He had lost weight, he had gained muscle, and, sometimes that really affects your behaviors. It can cause you to cheat in your relationship. It can cause you to seek out other partners that you think are better than the one that you already have because your self-esteem is improved. He also had a situation going on with his wife, Shannan, where she was selling Lavelle products called the Thrive that I've already mentioned. And she made a lot of videos. She was just putting her whole life kind of on the internet and on Facebook, and that was probably a stressor. And she would make kind of backhanded, sarcastic remarks, sort of putting him down. And she bossed him around a lot, and she seemed to be very assertive when he's a very passive person. And I don't know if that was maybe kind of building up some resentment in him. And I do not want to blame the victim. I'm not trying to do that. I don't believe in doing that. But it could have been a contributing factor. And then he had this new mistress who made him feel loved and wanted. Maybe she didn't put him down. Maybe she allowed him to feel more assertive. And he kind of got used to that and decided he was liking it. And one important thing that I noticed is it seems like someone had diagnosed him, like at the prison, maybe a psychologist, of having issues with dependent personality disorder. And there may be something to that because his mom Cindy Watts, seems to have something going on with her. And maybe she was kind of controlling his life since he was a child. And as an adult, there was definitely some friction going on between her and Shannan. And apparently, Shannan kind of bossed him around and made all the decisions. So maybe he's always dependent upon other people. And suddenly in this other situation with this new woman, maybe he felt like he could make decisions and be less dependent, but I don't think that meant that he had dependent personality disorder necessarily. But I do think he had poor decision-making skills, and his mom wasn't telling him what to do anymore. And Shannan was gone a lot during that time. She was gone 6 weeks to see family, and then she was out of town right before the murders. And maybe he was making poor decisions. He didn't have someone telling him what to do all the time, and he was having to decide how to handle things, and he didn't know how. So he didn't know how to make good decisions, so he made some awful ones. They didn't make a lot of sense. I didn't know how he could do what he did and actually think he could get away with it. It didn't make sense at all. He also had a lot of stressors in his life other than these that I've already mentioned. They were experiencing some financial difficulties. They bought a house that was so expensive that they really didn't make enough money to pay for it. They had 2 small children that were going to daycare that was expensive, a new baby on the way that was going to be more expensive. They'd already filed bankruptcy once. We're probably going to have to do it again. The HOA fees were past due. I mean, that's a lot to deal with. That's a lot of stressors there. There's a lot going on. And I also wanted to mention that forceline I did some research on that. The forcilene that's in the Thrive patches will also increase your testosterone level. And with increased testosterone level is increased aggression. So let me stop here and say, I'm not making excuses for Chris. I think he made some awful decisions, and I think he definitely deserves the sentence that he has. And any of these things alone are not an excuse for someone, or can't really explain why a person would do something like he did. But I'm saying, I'm going back to whoever coined that perfect storm theory, that all these things in combination with each other, and his inability to make good decisions, and not having any sleep, and having some chemicals raging in his bloodstream, and all the stress that he had, and then this new woman, and I think he just snapped. Not to make excuses. But I also want to mention, I keep remembering other things. He claims in the book that Cherlyn Cadle wrote, and forgive me, I said Diane earlier, and I did not mean Diane Cadle. Cherlyn Cadle wrote that he was possessed, that he felt like he was possessed by an evil entity. And I have people in my family who are religious, and they do believe in possession and evil spirits. And I'm not an expert on that. And that's something that I'm going to have to say, I don't know. And I don't mean to say that I'm an expert on any of this other stuff. This is just my opinion based on my limited experience. And I just wanted to share it. It's something that's been in my mind for the 2 years that I've been studying this case, and I wasn't going to cover it. But there's so much going on about this case right now, and I thought I just cannot stay silent about it. I want to express my opinions. But in closing, and this topic has been a hot topic here lately on YouTube, I've noticed, regarding his mistress, NK, I'm not going to say her name, people say, oh, she was there, she had to have helped. My opinion is, no. I think he acted alone. I think his judgment was very impaired. And I don't think anyone with any common sense would think you could get away with this. I think the likelihood of two people committing those murders and thinking they could get away with it is just not likely. It's just not a very high percentage at all, in my opinion. So in my opinion, she had nothing to do with it. Yes, she was involved with a married man, but according to her, they were getting a divorce and were separated. Anyway, thank you for listening. And again, give me a thumbs up if you like the video, and subscribe. And my thoughts and prayers go out to the Roost Checks. Very sorry for the loss of their family members.